What's up, Xpress fans? I am sorry about my voice. It is that time of season, so I'm just going around. But I'm going to try to go ahead and knock out this podcast for y'all before game day starts. And a couple things I want to start off before we go into our game day conversation is there's some playoff storylines, being that the college football rankings come out next, or this coming up Tuesday. There's a couple storylines that I'm eyeing. And the main one is Miami. Miami is currently sitting 6-1 on the season. And they might not make the playoffs despite being the top 10 team right now. And their only loss is to Louisville, and they're undefeated against AP opponents. When you look at their last five with SMU, Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, Pitt, that's a very easy schedule for them to win out in terms of everybody else on the season. The only one that's kind of scary is Pitt. I think Pitt is a very underrated team just because of how explosive that offense is kind of turning around and has been playing lately. Now, defensively, they allow a lot of points. So as long as Carson Beck doesn't play like he did against Florida or like he did against Louisville, then Miami should be fine and they should be able to put up the points. Miami has a top 10 defense, averaging 14 points per game, 7 yards allowed, 183 yards passing allowed. So, defensively, they're a unit, and everybody else on this list, they could shut down Syracuse. They're going to be able to shut down Virginia Tech, shut down NC State, shut down SMU. So, more than likely, they're going to go 11-1, but that's going to only finish fourth if Louisville, UVA, and Georgia Tech all wins out. So, if those three teams wins out, all three of those teams are 11-1. Well, depending on how that Georgia game goes for Tech, they could be undefeated. So you're looking at it where they're going to be the fourth best team. More than likely, they're going to eventually put UVA, and it all depends on how the college football rankings go, because they could put UVA a game or two or rank or two behind Miami, which we don't know yet because they don't come out till Tuesday. So it's all banking on where does the committee put Miami in the first ever CFP rankings. If they put Miami in the top 12, even if it's number 12 and they do win out and somebody ahead of them kind of falls down, like an Oregon or Ole Miss kind of falters, or even if Georgia Tech loses a game or two, as long as somebody 11-1 falters at some point and catches a loss, even if they're undefeated currently and they just catch one loss like a BYU, then they're going back into the top 11. But if they're sitting at top 12 and they're number 12, then they can always get replaced by a group of 5 with that auto bid. So what Miami is going to need, 1, they're going to need a win out. 2, they're going to have to finish top 3. They don't necessarily have to make their conference championship game, but they have to at least bank on Louisville losing another game or UVA losing another game. Somebody's going to have to lose a game in order for them to finish top 3. They need the Big 12. Their winner has to be a 2-loss. Like BYU has to catch 2 losses, or Texas Tech has to catch 2 losses. Somebody out of the Big 12 has to catch 2 losses, mainly the team above them, which will be BYU. So if BYU catches a loss, they're going to move behind Miami. The Big 12 champ, if they're a 2-loss team, then Miami is definitely going to be ranked higher than them. They're going to value a third-place, 1-loss ACC Miami team over a 2-loss Big 12 team. That's just how I think the committee is going to value it. And then, they're going to have to keep banking on the Big 10 crumbling down. Like, they're going to have to bank on a 3-team put out from the Big 10. And they're going to have to bank on that the bottom half from the middle part down in the SEC continues to fall apart. Because if Vandy wins out, beats Tennessee, Georgia wins out, Bama wins out, A&M wins out, and Ole Miss wins out, and they beat everybody else, then A&M's going to fall. But if A&M wins out, Ole Miss wins out, Vandy, Bama, and Georgia win out, then it's going to be a really tough day. So they're going to need somebody, Vandy, Bama, Georgia, one of those 5 teams to fall and only be a 4-bid team. That's kind of where I see it. Now, there's so many things that could happen, and it's all determined on what the rankings are going to be for the college football playoffs. And we won't know that till Tuesday. Another storyline that I'm looking at is the pathway for 3 out of the Big 12. Currently, there is 2 plausible pathways I see for the Big 12 to put 3 teams in. The most realistic one, and this goes against who I have winning the Big 12 championship, and that's BYU loses to Texas Tech. Texas Tech wins out, Houston wins out. And then BYU and Tech play each other in the Big 12 championship. That means Miami's going to end up taking another loss. Louisville's going to end up taking another loss. Or UVA. Louisville or UVA can take another loss. That means Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana all worn out. And the same scenario applies with the SEC. One of those 5 SEC teams faltered. They fell and leaving only 4 teams. Because the way the Big Ten's looking, the Big 12 is going to end up putting more teams in just because they have the opportunity to have more teams ranked inside the top 15 than the Big Ten does currently. So if that happens, that means BYU, Texas Tech will more than likely play in the Big 12 championship. And if that's the case, the 2-loss team's going to be, Texas Tech might go 2 losses, but it's going to have to be the team that is ranked lower that wins. Because if Texas Tech is ranked higher than BYU and BYU beats Texas Tech, right, then they're going to adjust the rankings. The lower team's going to get the auto bid if they're not already a top 12 team. If they're like ranked 13, Texas Tech, let's say, goes up ranked 8, then Texas or BYU wins. BYU might get put at 11. Texas Tech might get pulled down to 10, or vice versa. One gets pulled down to 11, the other one gets auto bid in at 9 or 10. Now, my number 2 scenario is the one I like the most, because this goes with the team that I have winning the Big 12. Cincinnati wins out, meaning they beat Utah and BYU. Texas Tech wins out, meaning that they beat BYU, because Texas Tech plays BYU first. So if Texas Tech, who's at 13 currently, beats BYU, who's more than likely going to be top 10, that means Texas Tech will go top 10. They don't play Cincinnati for the rest of the year. So then Cincinnati wins out, beating BYU, who's going to be more than likely, even if BYU does falter, they're going to be a top 13, top 12 team by the time they play Cincinnati. So then Cincinnati beats them. They become a top 13, top 12 team. Texas Tech more than likely will become ranked 8, ranked 7, depending on how the season falls out. If Texas Tech becomes ranked 7, this is going to be the biggest point. Texas Tech becoming ranked 8 or ranked 7. And then Cincinnati beating them, jumping in because of the auto conference bid. Texas Tech falls down to 10 or 11. Houston wins out. But what's going to have to happen, once again, Houston winning out, Texas Tech winning out are kind of the 2 proven points. And everything that's going to happen is Texas Tech's going to have to be finished top 8 before title game. Cincinnati wins, getting the auto bid in. And Houston climbs to top 11 because you're going to have 1 bid out of the ACC. Right? If Georgia Tech's the only team, like UVA, Louisville, Miami, all catches another loss, they're all 2-loss teams. And then Georgia Tech, even if they lose to Georgia and wins the ACC championship, they're going to be a 1-loss team, winning the ACC. The Big Ten needs to only put in the 3 that they have. But Oregon's going to have to catch another loss, or Ohio State's going to have to catch a loss. Bama, A&M, Georgia, and Vandy all have to win out. The current top 10 teams have to win out, or Ole Miss has to win out. So Ole Miss or Vandy is going to have to win out. It's the same scenario that I talked about for Miami. That those 5 teams, one of those 5 is going to have to drop a loss some way, somehow. But that is what my current picture is on the CFP rankings and the pathways that I see currently. Now, everything can obviously change up depending on how the rankings go. All right. Starting off with my game day notes. Now, I have a lot of people expecting Utah to win. Utah is a 10.5 point favorite in this game. I understand why Utah is a 10.5 point favorite over Cincinnati. They're a top 10 defense, only allowing 14 points a game. They're top 15 in sacks, having about 25 on the season. They only allowed 136 yards on the ground, 148 through the air. They're going against a top 30 defense, allowing 19 points per game. So Utah, it's a home game for Utah. Everything circles. Utah is the superior team. But I just love Cincinnati. I love their tenacity. I love the way their quarterback plays. The way Brandon Sorby plays, to me, is lights out. He can run the ball. He can throw the ball. He's a little inaccurate. Obviously, you can see that with his completion percentage. But he shows up when it matters. He did it against Kennesaw. He showed up against Kansas when it mattered. That offensive line has been phenomenal, only allowing 2 sacks all season. I think that's going to be one of the strongest points. If that offensive line can hold up, which I'm banking that it holds up against a top 15 defensive line or defense in sacks, they can hold up like that, allow a sack, even no sacks. I'm not going to say it's realistic where they're not going to allow a sack, but as long as they don't allow multiple and it's just 1 sack, maybe 2, Cincinnati's going to have the opportunity, because the one thing about Utah is their offense is a little inconsistent. Yes, their offense is a top 15 unit just like Cincinnati's, but the difference between the two offenses is Cincinnati had a bad showing offensively at the beginning of the season, and ever since, they have turned it around where they're scoring. Utah, on the other hand, had 2 great games against 2 bad teams at the beginning of the year. Scored. Played a good defense, struggled. Scored again against an iffy defense. Played a top 15, top 20 defense, struggled. Granted, it was a rivalry game against BYU, but Utah has showed inconsistencies. Even though, yes, they dropped 53 on Colorado. Colorado's not a good defense. So I think there's inconsistencies in the style of play, and I think it all depends on who the quarterback is for Utah. That is the biggest question. Who is the quarterback going to be? I actually want to double check this, because I am also curious on if he's active. Now, they're calling that he's active. That's what they're saying. So if Damper is playing, then this should be a tightly contested game like Cincinnati's had all year. If he's not playing and it's their backup, I do believe Cincinnati's going to have the opportunity to make him inconsistent. So for me personally, I like Cincinnati's offensive line. I like Brandon Sorby's ability at quarterback. Granted, their defense is a little questionable. Can they really stop Utah's offense? Because Utah can score when it matters. If it comes down to playing a bad defense, they can score. But I'm going to trust in the offensive line. I'm going to trust in Brandon Sorby. If it turns into a shootout, I think Cincinnati is going to be able to get the job done. Going over to Texas versus Vandy. Texas, to me, it's so hard to really just describe Texas, because their offense is now finally putting up points, but they're putting up points against bad defenses. Kentucky's a bad defense. Mississippi State's a bad defense. So they're putting up points, but they're struggling very early, and they're having to make comebacks very late. They forced 2 overtime games to win against Kentucky and Mississippi State. Vandy, on the other hand, is a team, I don't see them allowing somebody to come back. Once they take a lead, that's that. And they've been able to maintain control once they take a lead and grow the lead. So for me, as much as I would like to go to Texas, because Vandy's just a new feel, Vandy's never been in this type of spotlight before, Vandy's just done too much with Diego Pavia under center to really show me that they're not capable of winning. Now, granted, this is going to be the best defense since Bama, but they've shown to be able to win in struggling defense situations like they did against Missouri. Like, that Missouri game was a 10-point ball game. I mean, that was a defensive slugfest on them barely being able to gain yardage. But at the end of the game, they done what they needed to do, put a score in the scoreboard books to win the game. So I can't sit here and say, well, Vandy, if it's a defensive game, I don't know how they're going to play. They've shown that they can play in a shootout style, a defensive style. The biggest thing, as long as they don't have turnovers, as long as they keep the ball, Vandy, to me, I think they have the ability to beat Texas. I mean, I really do. I think Vandy really has what it takes to beat Texas. Now, a couple honorable mentions to kind of look at before we get into my game of the week. You got Georgia versus Florida. I honestly, as a Georgia fan, I am a little scared that Florida will come and surprise us like they did last year because they were struggling last year. And they turned around and they almost beat us. And if it wasn't for DJ getting hurt in the first, it could have been a different ball game. You got Penn State going to Ohio State, which that's a no contest game. Miami going to SMU. This is a game that Miami has to win. I mentioned it earlier, talking about scenarios. This is a game that is on Miami's slate that they have to win. You got Houston and for West Virginia playing. West Virginia could be a hit or miss offense. Louisville versus Virginia Tech. You've seen how Louisville played against Boston College. They cannot play the same way against VTech. Indiana versus Maryland is going to be a fun 3:30 game. Virginia versus Cal is going to be a great game at 3:45 because Virginia has had a tendency of going into overtime or damn near going into overtime. So if Virginia plays another close game against Cal, I'm a little worried that Cal is going to make squeeze. But on the flip side of it, though, they have a young quarterback that has not had the experience of going to overtime. So I feel like if they do force an overtime, then the experience that UVA has in those situations should prevail. Georgia Tech going to NC State. This is kind of a redemption game from last year when Georgia Tech won out a close one over Virginia Tech at home. So now I'm at NC State. So now NC State has the opportunity to do the same thing that Georgia Tech did to them last year. Ooh, the stutter there got pretty bad. But we're going to go ahead and talk about my game of the day, being Oklahoma going to Tennessee. Oklahoma going to Knoxville. To me, you look at how OU's offensive line, that's going to be the biggest story of this game. OU's offensive line. They've allowed 17 sacks. They only allow 101 yards rushing from their running back. So you take John Mateer out of the situation, they're only averaging 101 yards a game, averaging 3.7 yards a carry. Probably a little less than that if you take John Mateer out. So this is an offensive line that's going to have to really step up because I think Tennessee, as bad as their defense collectively is, Tennessee does have the tenacity to get to a quarterback. Tennessee ranks in the top 10 in sacks. So Tennessee is going to very definitely be able to, I think, snuff the run, and they're going to be able to get after John Mateer. That's something that won them the game against Mississippi State, and I think that's something that's going to be able to keep them in the game against Oklahoma. And to me, I think Oklahoma's defense, despite being a top 10, top 15 unit in defense, I feel like when it comes to Oklahoma, they haven't played a caliber in offense like Tennessee's until Ole Miss. And we've seen how that defense played against Ole Miss's speed. And with Tennessee being a top 3 defense, 510 yards a game, 45.6 points a game, this is an offense that's going to be able to score. I think they got 2 great running backs that can really change up the dynamics of the game. They got speed at receiver. I don't know if the DBs are going to really be able to keep up with that type of speed. And now the difference maker was Trinidad in the Ole Miss game, the ability to escape the pocket. I do not think there's any rain on the forecast for this game. So this is going to be a little bit clearer of a night game for Tennessee. And it's a home game at night. I don't like the way OU is crumbling. I think the fall is going to continue because I think OU's defensive stats have been inflated. Their performance on film has been inflated because they've played bad offenses. And I think Tennessee's, once again, another great offense that's going to expose a lot of issues that OU has not been talked about because of the lack of offensive firepower that they've played up to this point. So, for me personally, I'm going to rock Tennessee. So, you hear it from me, Cincinnati over Utah. You got Vandy over Texas, and Tennessee holding down the fort at home. Like always, let's enjoy a great football or Saturday football. I will, and I'll hit y'all in the next one.